The Embroidered Sunset by Joan Aiken, 12. Pictures by an old lady patient, half embroidered with bits of stuff stuck all over them. Superintendent Noddle smiled skeptically. They seem funny things to make off with. Someone playing a practical joke, maybe? What would you value them at, Dr. Adnon? Well, I gave the old lady £50 apiece for them, Adnon replied moderately. Noddle dropped his ballpoint and gaped at the doctor. £50 apiece? Oh, you're joking. I am aware that I got them at a bargain price and was hardly playing fair with the poor old person. But what have you? I am only a hard-up general practitioner. I am not a Rothschild. Adnon carefully rubbed one of his bronze buttons and flicked a ruffle into place. One must be thrifty where one can. I think you must be clean round the bend, Noddle muttered, making a note. 12 pictures. Owner's valuation £600. Subjects Christian mythology, Bible pictures. Any suspicion as to who might have made off with them? Yes, indeed. Noddle's telephone rang. He picked up the receiver. Switchboard, Superintendent. There's a Mr. Benevik on the line calling from Colsham, Surrey, who wants to speak to somebody about a Miss Culpepper. Could you take the call? Benevik, Adnon looked up. He's ringing about Miss Culpepper. Hello, said Noddle. Kirby Police here. Can I help you? As he sat listening, his blank expression intensified. Presently he said, And what value did this expert place on the picture? I beg your pardon? And you say you have reason to believe the old lady has been missing for several hours? Adnon looked at him sharply. The niece has gone after her and not returned. Are you aware? The niece has gone after her and not returned. Are you aware, Mr. Benevik, that this old lady was reported missing once before, and that time it turned out that she had simply gone to sleep in someone's car? Yes, very well. We'll look into it. I'm afraid we're short-staffed at the moment, though we've been having exceptionally heavy rain here and several roads are flooded. Yes, we'll do what we can, and ring you back as soon as possible. He wrote down a number. Old Miss Culpepper's missing, said Adnon. Wandered off again, it seems, and the niece has gone after her. Why this Benevik rings from Surrey to tell me this, I'm not quite clear. I'll just get someone to call Wildfell and check that she hasn't returned in the meantime. He did so. While they waited, Adnon said, I had better get back to Wildfell Hall without delay. If the old lady has been wandering for long in this weather, it will be a miracle if she survives, and little Lucy is not a strong girl. He glanced at his watch. Have to go the long way round to Apley, Noddle said. There's been a sudden outflow of water halfway down Clegg Hill. Report just came in. It sounds like the underground seepage from the reservoir. Worrying, that is. With the extra weight of water, there must be up top right now. If it comes out in one place, it might somewhere else. Anyhow, part of Apley Road's washed away. You'll have to go round through Strinton Dale. Then I should be off. Adnon got briskly to his feet. The sergeant came in. I've been on the line to the old people's home, Superintendent. Neither Miss Culpepper nor her niece are back yet. Like to go up there, Sergeant, and see what's happening? Want to go in the police car, Doctor? Thanks, but I prefer to go in my own car. I know how reckless your police drivers can be. Lucy leaned against Colonel Linton's doorpost and pressed the bell. Supposing he's out. Well, suppose he remembers me and is still mad. Presently the door flew open. Colonel Linton appeared, swaying slightly, and peered at Lucy with bloodshot eyes. Who are you? He said truculently. Third girl who's come pestering me in the last 3 weeks. First some stranger than my own granddaughter, and now... What is this? Some kind of mass observation stunt? Could you come and help me, please? Lucy said. I've got old Miss Culpepper on the other side of the wall at the top of your garden, and I can't get her over. She's wet and cold and very faint. Old Miss Culpepper thought she'd died. Sure it's not her ghost? No, but it soon will be if she's left there much longer. Please come. Lucy grabbed his hand. He came reluctantly. A dry stone wall divided the untended garden from the tree-hung cliff beyond, and a flight of protruding stone slabs had been set in the wall as for steps. On the far side of the wall, on the bottom step, sat Aunt Fennel. God bless me heart. That's old Zaff, or is it Dilly? Never could be certain which was which after we passed our mid-80s. Whatever are you doing there, me dear? Come down from High Beck by the cliff path. Flighty sort of thing to do at your age. Why not use the bridge? Not much farther. Well, never mind. Here, you give us a hand, gal. I'll shove you up here. You steady her there. That's the ticket. Colonel Linton clambered over the wall and, showing unexpected strength and dexterity, hoisted Aunt Fennel up to Lucy, assisting her on her way with a powerful waft of Highland bluebell. Then he clambered back, and Lucy tipped Aunt Fennel down into his arms. Puffing a good deal, purple-faced but triumphant, he carried her into the house. Lucy, following, was relieved to find that he had taken her to the warm kitchen and placed her on a high, deep-backed settee. Never expected to be doing that, Daff, me dear. How did it do? He said, panting. Oh, good as honeymoon, eh? Aunt Fennel's eyes had been closed. She opened them briefly and gave a faint smile. Edward, fancy. Now, if you have some blankets, Colonel Linton, and a tot of your egg and whiskey mixture, not a Highland bluebell. Anything you say, me dear. He produced eggs and some rather moth-eaten blankets, then tactfully retired while Lucy peeled off a layer or two of Aunt Fennel's numerous garments, discovering with relief that the rain had not penetrated beyond her petticoat. While she was being wrapped in blankets, a large tabby stalked in and lay down on the rag mat in front of the stove. There! Exclaimed Lucy. That's the cat I saw at High Beck. That's not Taffy Puss, said Aunt Fennel, disappointed. Not a bit like, much bigger. Not Taffy Puss, I should think not, said Colonel Linton, returning. Don't you remember? I buried poor Taffy 3-4 years ago. Fox got him. Colonel Linton, are you on the phone by any chance? Lucy asked. Afraid not, me dear. Oh, well, I'll walk down and phone the post office in a moment, said Lucy, leaning against the kitchen table. The room swayed, then settled. She felt as if she were still manhandling Aunt Fennel along that greasy, nightmarish little path, tippily overhanging the rock-filled gully. I can get my car at the same time. As you wish, said the Colonel vaguely. He sat down by Aunt Fennel. Now, deal, me dear. How are you feeling? Had you tot? A bit better, eh? Yes, thank you, Edward, she said faintly. It seems quite homely to be here again, but I am disappointed about Taffy Puss. Lucy looked at her great-aunt in affectionate exasperation. Then she caught sight of the kitchen clock. Is that the right time, Colonel Linton? My watch seems to have stopped. And do you have a radio? You're filling in one of those BBC listener research forms? He said suspiciously. No, it's just something I wanted to listen to. Oh, that's different. Test score, was it? In the dining room, me dear. Help yourself, he said, busily trucking up Aunt Fennel more comfortably in her fusty blankets. Lucy wandered weakly into the dining room and found a radio on the windowsill, a gigantic period piece with Art Nouveau arabesques of fretwork all over the front, about 18 different knobs, and a list of stations, including national, regional, and Droitwich. Mercifully, it was already tuned to BBC Band 4. She switched it on and left it to warm, which it did at the speed of the tundra in the Arctic spring. I ought to warm up too, Lucy thought. Wrap in a blanket like Aunt Fennel. Too tired just at this moment. I'll listen to Max first. Those two old things are perfectly happy in there, having a lovely gossip. She could hear the gentle counterpoint of voices from the kitchen. She sat down, facing Aunt Fennel's pictures across the huge expanse of dusty mahogany, and propped her chin on her hands. If only my head didn't ache so, and if I didn't have this curious pain in my chest, as if my chest were jammed against the square bracket, I'd be able to think. I've got to try and work out why those two men were chasing Willoughby. What was going on? So as to phone police about it. Phone Fiona about Aunt Fennel. Phone Max. She looked up at the row of pictures. Jacob and Esau, Rachel and Leah, Saul and David, Moses and Aaron. Curious, I never noticed before that each of Aunt Fennel's pictures was in fact double, one image superimposed on another, like the cottage that day. Those two brothers now. Jacob is Willoughby. Why didn't I notice that before? Scheming and smiling, planning to come out on top one way or another. And Rachel could be Aunt Fennel when she was young. David playing to Saul? He looks like somebody familiar. I wonder who. I wonder if Aunt Fennel knows about this. That sunset with the 4 figures. That is really something much more complex and mysterious. They were all mysterious. She let her eyes drift along from one enigma to the next, each more profound, subtle, and beautiful than the last. But I can almost understand them if I just had a little more energy. Dear Max, I can't wait for you to see them. If anything could put you back on your feet again, I believe they could. Dear Max.
6 o'clock, said the announcer. And now we have a recorded program of the celebrated pianist Max Benedict playing Bach's Goldberg variations.
The orderly, jeweled music began to move out into the room. More enigmas, Lucy thought. Hieroglyphics. No, a maze. A wonderfully worked-out maze in which every compartment leads logically to the next, and yet you feel it is only one of an infinite number of possibilities. Soon I shall be able to see the whole pattern, which is in fact the same as Aunt Fennel's Embroidered Sunset. How extraordinary that is. I believe I've discovered something really fundamental. If this pain would ease up a little, I could understand the whole thing. Her eyes closed. How can I get rid of Russ? Willoughby thought, letting his detestable son drive him through the maze of Kirby's back streets. It was lighting up time. Orange sodium flickered and dripped through the deluge. Police loudspeaker vans toured the town, bawling some announcement. What are they saying? Can't catch, the accent's so thick in these parts. Power cut, maybe, or warning there's an escaped convict in the region. He's thought to be in London, Willoughby muttered. Here we are. Russ pulled up to the first aid post, but Willoughby, irritable with agony, said, No, go into the car park, Russ. This is a no parking zone. We don't want the cops towing the van away. I can walk 50 yards, for God's sake. Proper little hero, Russ said, spinning the wheel, running the Land Rover down the slope. A red and white barrier arm rose to let them in, and Russ found a space at the back. This inconspicuous enough for you? Come on, then. Better you get fixed up before gangrene sets in. The sister at the first aid post was horrified. Really, you want to go to hospital and have it x-rayed? All I can do is clean it up for you. No time to go to hospital, Willoughby said. We're hoping to get your plane in Liverpool. Mind you get it as soon as you can. How did you ever do it? Motor mower jammed. Tried to free it. Horrible, dangerous things. The sister launched happily into a series of blood-curdling anecdotes about crushed feet and severed toes, which saw her nicely through Willoughby's cleansing and dressing. You're abandoning the rest of the pictures, then, said Russ outside. Only for the moment, with Harbin and Gates out of the way. It'll be all right to come back soon. With Russ out of the way, too, he thought. And there's still Linda, but I can deal with her. What about the old lady? Did you see her? Identify her? Never did. I guess she was cut off in the cottage with Lucy. Maybe they'll be rescued. Or maybe they won't, you hope? Willoughby did not answer. Russ started up. It was at this moment that the weight of water, which had been forcing its way from the reservoir through a fault in the limestone hole beyond Kirby, suddenly split the last 2 feet of concrete and burst out through the rear wall of the underground car park. Russ, glancing to his right before driving off, saw the wall behind him open like a dolphin's jaws and spew out water. Instinctively, he jabbed down the accelerator and the Land Rover bounded forward. Christ, Russ, what's happened? I don't know, but we've got to get out quick. Other people had the same idea. The water was up to their ankles and more coming at a frightening rate. Russ made for a narrow opening between 2 other cars, both converging on the exit. There was not enough room. They all 3 jammed. Reverse, you fool, yelled Willoughby. I'm trying to. Russ battled with the gear shift. Then he gave it up, jumped down, up to his waist in muddy, oily water, and ran. Russ, wait for me! Willoughby cast an agonized look back at the load of pictures. All those wonderful treasures. We'll be famous. We'll be celebrated. We'll be justified. No time. Have to leave them. He scrambled down, sobbing and cussing. Russ! God rot, you wait for me! He was shorter than Russ. The water came up to his chest. He could see Russ ahead of him, a long way away.
A long way ahead, making for the heaving, hooting, churning tangle of cars that blocked both exit and entrance. Wilby pushed someone aside, tried to climb over a bonnet, slipped, started toiling forward again, but it was already too late. Miss Culpepper hasn't come back since we rang you? The police sergeant asked. Fiona shook her head. No, she hasn't. No message, nothing. Adnan, standing behind the sergeant, saw Mrs. Marsham come out of her office and give them a strange, polite, panicky glance. Police, checking Miss Culpepper's disappearance, Fiona said. Mrs. Marsham seemed to relax a little, but she was pale and strained, her glasses crooked, hair untidy. You've no news of her? She asked. Not yet, madam. We're just going along to inquire in the village. Can I hitch a lift with you? Fiona said. Time I was getting back to my baby. Mrs. T's Anne will be here in 20 minutes, she told Mrs. Marsham. And I've cut all the bread and butter for supper, and Emma Chiddock's waiting to help you. Mrs. Marsham nodded tiredly. Fiona climbed into Dr. Adnan's Alpha. I don't much like that woman, but she's in a bad way, poor thing, she said to Adnan. Do you think you ought to go back presently and give her a tranquilizer or something? Yes, I will do that, he said. Let us hope we find Lucy and the aunt at the cottage. Then I will go back with them and look after all three. At the foot of High Beck Lane, the sergeant's attention was attracted by a large white towel tied in an ostentatious manner to the parsonage gatepost. Who lives there? He asked, pulling up. Colonel Linton. Colonel Linton. Seems as if he wanted to attract attention. I'll just inquire. They watched him ring the bell, and Colonel Linton opened the door and talk. The sergeant turned and beckoned. Adnan joined him. Fiona followed inquisitively. The hunt is over. They are here, Adnan said. Here? Why hasn't Lizzie phoned then? Where is she? What happened? Colonel Linton had embarked on a long, complicated explanation. Broken bridge. Cliff path. Amazing old lady, 92 if she's a day. What was it, 93? And my own little granddaughter, Kathy. Horrible sad about her. Proper Linton. Where's Lucy? Fiona demanded again. They were all standing in the flagged front hall. Adnan moved into the dining room. From the kitchen they could hear Aunt Fennel's voice. It's been a nice visit, Edward, but I'm a little tired. Think I'd better be getting back to the place with it. Have a bit of supper and off to bed. Must be nearly supper time. Where's my Lucy, child? That's why she didn't phone, Adnan said. Lucy was sitting at the table, apparently resting with her head pillowed on her arms. Just the way I found her an hour ago, with record rendezvous turned on full blast. Colonel Linton was explaining wretchedly to the sergeant. Thought I'd leave her so, but turned off the radio. She's not dead. I'm afraid so. Adnan touched her wrist. It was her heart, without doubt. Silly, silly girl. She always would do more than she ought. He looked down at her dark, muscle-plum eyes, glistened with tears. He looked down at her. His dark, muscle-plum eyes glistened with tears. He said very crossly, And now I suppose I shall have to be the one to telephone this Max Benedict, and God knows what damage that is going to do, if he has the same feeling for her that she had for him. Besides which, there is this poor old lady. You will take charge of her, he said to Fiona. Yes, all right. Without any more ado, Fiona turned on her heel and walked into the kitchen. Aunt Fennel, she said, I've got a piece of dreadful news for you, I'm afraid. What, dearie? It's about Lucy. She's had a heart attack. I'm afraid she's dead. Aunt Fennel looked up at Fiona, moving her head slowly. She took out her hearing aid, stared at it, returned it to her ear. Dead, she repeated. Lucy dead. Yes, I'm afraid so. There was a longish pause. The sergeant came back to the police car and was radioing for an ambulance. Colonel Linton gloomily shook up a whiskey and mentholated cocktail in a jam jar, gazed at it, and poured it down the sink. Adnan gently checked the old lady's pulse and breathing. She suffered this unresisting, almost unnoticing. Presently, she murmured to herself, Dead, quite peaceful and happy, then like Dill, like Taffy Puss. All right. She looked triumphantly at Adnan. All right, he said, dear me. Yes, and you're all right, too. All set for 100, I should judge. You're a marvellous old lady, aren't you? What's your secret?
My secret?
Fennel looked at him again, and then beyond him to Fiona, at the sergeant, at Colonel Linton. You mean, which of them am I? She smiled to herself, a smile that her great niece would have recognized. She said to Adnan, if I didn't see fit to tell my Lucy child, do you think that I would tell any of you?
And that's the end of The Embroidered Sunset. Interesting book, very surprise ending. And of course, there will be more Joan Aiken in the future, but we are still in the midst of listener request period. So our next book will be another listener request, and we will see you there.